Freeview, welcome to this faction focus with my favourites.
Me.
The Drukhari. Not you.
It's not me?
There they are. Look, little Drukhari. So we're talking the good, the bad and the ugly in this faction focus. In a post-Munitorum Field Manual world with the points increases, etc. And also on top of that, as of filming this, the new 40k FAQ has dropped. And there's actually a lot of bad in that. I'm going to straight up say that. So I will be covering that as well as how that affects Drukhari in the bad section. So let's go over how this video is going to run today. We're going to break this down into three parts. The goods, which I think is overall are overall the winners. Post Munitorum Field Manual, what was perhaps good before and is still good, or perhaps new things which are now interesting. Then we'll break down the bad, what no longer works or is just plain pointed poorly, or and then we'll talk a little bit about the ugly for Drukhari, which are things which I think don't work, not necessarily because they're bad, but because the rules either don't make sense or they need to be improved or worked on or tweaked. So that's your sort of your strange and wonderful section, which will need to work, hopefully in a future codex or whatever. So look, let's kick off with the good.
Yes.
There are a few good things from the Munitorum Field Manual. First up, I'm going to go for a really small one, but one that you never really saw. So I'll start with that first. A blast pistol.
Cheeky.
The blast pistol is cheeky now at 5 points. Before at 10 points, you would rarely, if ever, see it. And if you did, you'd see it on an Archon. Now, the fact that it is 5 points, now the fact that you can put it on your sergeants, which are like Hecatrix or the sergeants of the witches and the Cabalites, and that you can put those, and you probably will be putting those units in transports. So you'll be jetting across the boards, and if you go for something like Flayed Skull, you've got an extra 3-inch move on that transport.
So
like a Venom will be 19-inch move, plus your blast pistol.
So 25 inches. Look, when you're getting out there and you need to start removing armored things from those objectives, yeah, I mean, if you're doing what you like to do with your Venom spam, so many nightmares.
Everything okay there, Ben?
Not really. I'm having flashbacks. I'm having horrific flashbacks. So bad.
The problem is if you don't run the Drukhari in a certain way, they also just die horribly. And it's a real knife edge thing with them.
It's something. It's something. But this is a great. I think that is really good for 5 points. You kind of go, well, why wouldn't I? That extra blast pistol, especially because you'll be swarming those objectives. Because I mean, most armies at the moment, unless you're coming up against another kind of Elder style army, maybe Harlequins or something like that, we are going to see a lot more transports, but a lot of them aren't going to have invulnerable saves. In fact, I would say the majority of them won't. And you're going to have less of them depending on who you play. But the majority of armies, you're probably expecting around 3 transports. If you're playing an army that would be like the Astra Militarum, for example, maybe you've got 6. But, you get 3. So let's use Tau, for example.
Sure.
So, 3 Devilfish. I've been running quite consistently. And they have worked to a degree. I don't think they're the best transports, but we've talked about that in my faction focus. But they're not bad. They're pretty fast. They've got the drones that can come off, and then they've got the units inside. So you do have to expend a lot of firepower to shift them. But if I've got 3 of them, and you've got 7 Venoms coming in with 7 blasters, and then you've got the Splinter Cannons on there as well. I'm not staying on those objectives for 2 turns with Tau. I'm just not with that sort of stuff. Granted, there's another turn in there where I get to hit back at you, but with all your minuses and the nonsense that is how you roll, particularly, it's a bad time for me. So blast pistols are only, don't. But the blast pistols, I agree. For 5 points, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I'm not saying you're going to build a whole list around it, but I'm saying it is an interesting option now. And in my opinion, Drukhari have actually always had a major issue with dealing with mechanized walls and anti-tank in general.
Poison.
So, any source where we can get a little bit more anti-tank options in there is a good thing.
Yeah.
Next up is the Void Raven.
I was already a huge fan.
Yeah, it was a winner before.
Yeah.
I think now especially it's a winner. You don't have to pay for the missiles, which is always an arbitrary anyway. Yes, I know the points have gone up, so the missiles are kind of included. I get that. But bear in mind, everything's gone up.
Yeah.
And with the way that the Razor Wing has now gone up, I think the points difference between the Razor Wing, especially if you've gone for Disintegrators, which we'll get to later, the Void Raven's just playing better, in my opinion. I will always pay the extra points for the Void Raven now.
Yeah.
And given the fact it's got that bomb, and with the things like obscuring terrain, which are obviously a thing now in 9th edition, having the ability to jet that flyer up across the board and drop a bomb on a unit which you couldn't otherwise see is gold. Is absolute gold.
Key. And then the fact that you don't have to be as careful with your positioning with the flyers now, because they can just fly off and then return. Which I always thought was a bit of a weird rule anyway. It never made sense to me as to why a flyer would disappear from the battlefield when you're in the heat of battle and never return.
Yeah, just no.
Yeah. So you can if you can make that move and if it fits, then it just makes them a lot more potent.
Yeah.
And they're quite fast as well. They've got like a minimum 60-inch move, right? Yeah. Maximum, rather. Forgive me. Which is the board now.
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. I'm a huge fan. Think they're great.
Yeah. So and again, it's a source of anti-tank, which you're generally thin on with Drukhari. So next is the Talos, and an honorary mention to Grotesques because they fill similar roles in some ways. Difference is that Grotesques generally need a transport option to be delivered. You can web raid them in, and do various bits. But generally you want that delivery system, whereas a Talos obviously have to stand by themselves, but they're resilient enough to do it. You're generally seeing them in Prophets of the Flesh with a 4+ invulnerable save. They have received a bit of a points increase, but it seems to me relative with other monster-like creatures in the rest of the game at the moment, and they were good before, they're still really good now.
Yeah.
Another source of anti-tank with Haywire and also being able to do it in combat.
Which is great.
Can absolutely rip up hordes with the chain flails and deal with vehicles as well with the macro scalpel. Can be taken in units of up to 3. So yeah, a winner for me. And in an edition where you do want to get out onto those objectives and have something strong, powerful, these Talos sitting there.
Yeah, it just sits there and says, do you really want to try and take this from me?
Yeah.
Is that what you want to do?
Come and get it. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Come as close as you like.
Yeah.
I think like you say, they're one of those units that really fulfill a multiple roles.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying looking at units at the moment which are good deterrent units.
Yeah.
So, and I think they're a great deterrent unit.
Yeah.
Because you want to get close. It's like, cool, you better make sure you kill me, because if you don't, I kill you.
Yeah.
And it's also good if you're against like shooting armies and stuff, because they're going to have to wait to come forward to you. So they're going to put their firepower into you. And if they don't clear you, that's another turn where you're scoring points and they're not.
Yeah.
So
and it's difficult to deal with Talos. They can be dealt with, of course.
Of course.
But,
they have what, 5 up?
They've got a 5 up base, but they have a 4+ invulnerable save in Prophets of the Flesh.
Yeah, but
which is what you'll always see them as.
Well, what am I thinking of there? Did they used to ignore wounds as well on 5s? Or
No, they ignore wounds on 6s because they've got power from pain.
Right, so, that's what I'm thinking of. So it's just another thing as well.
Yeah, they are very irritating, and they should be 7 wounds. Yes, they're 7 wounds.
Yeah,
I thought, no, they're not 8 wounds. No, they're 7 wounds.
Yeah. At a unit
which is
of
really
3, that's 21 wounds.
Yeah.
4 up invulnerable, ignoring wounds on 6s. What's their toughness? 5 or 6?
Their toughness is 6, but you can get it up to 7.
But you can get it up to 7
because you'll have a homunculus nearby. Now there are some issues, but that's going to be addressed in the bad section with the FAQ. But the good news is that if you take a unit of 3 Talos, and you take actually more than 1 unit of 3, so you say take 2 units of 3 or even 3 units of 3, they will be able to screen the characters.
Yeah, which is
because you're going to have homunculus on foot.
Yeah,
probably Yuri and Rakarth. So that still works. Don't worry, we'll get to the FAQ in the bad section.
Yes.
So that's Talos. Grotesques, again, they don't have the firepower. They do need a bit of delivery system, but I still think for their points, they are a deadly unit in 9th. You're going to be able to zip them up the board because we do have lots of fast-moving transports, nuke enemy infantry, even elite infantry on an objective, and then cause a lot of problems hanging around there as required. Next, that is a big winner, in my opinion.
Me too.
And that I was interested in before 9th, before the Munitorum Field Manual anyway, are the Incubi.
Something that, I'll be honest, I know not as much about.
So
Take me on a journey.
I'll take you on a journey.
Please.
So Jazar is also a good character, but I'm going to talk a bit about the characters in a minute. But the Incubi are a very, very efficient combat unit for their points. They're not the most resilient in the world. You know, they're only 1 wound, so they've only got a 3 up save. I say only, but you know, that's good for Drukhari in general. But you know, if their boats are destroyed, they're not going to have the easiest time getting across the board.
Sure.
That aside, the fact that they're not too expensive now, they're not too expensive in the grand scheme of how most points for things have gone up, and even comparatively to your troops choices, to be able to take 3 units of Incubi and whack them in things like Venoms and saturate the board with other threats, in my opinion, is a real winner, because the way that you can use these guys, you can zip them across the board, turn 1, to the objectives. And if your opponent's already started on those objectives, you can zip them up the board. Your opponent has to deal with the Venom or the raid that they're in. They'll then pop out. And if they don't deal with those Incubi, because the Incubi can basically do a turn 2 charge in most scenarios if they're still alive, just because of the speed that you have across the board.
Yeah.
They will murder most types of infantry in combat. So I can clear most things which are going to be holding an objective.
That's nice.
And then I've got infantry on that objective, being the Incubi, which is numbers of models.
Yeah.
And in 9th, you want that.
Yes.
You want that a lot. So this reactionary unit, which I can whack in these Venoms, I think are a winner. I think for their points now, they're in the better tier of infantry that Drukhari can take, and of infantry in general. So for me, yeah, they're a winner.
Yeah, that sounds like, I like the denial aspects of the point scoring with them. I think that's really nice.
Well, that's kind of how I see them being used.
Yeah.
I see them being flung forward in a transport and then leaping out of that transport to clear off enemy infantry that are holding an objective. And they're strong enough in combat to actually be able to do that. And they'll generally get there faster than something like the Talos, which I see as more babysitting a central objective and they're not moving. Whereas the Incubi can go out and get those enemy objectives in their deployment zone, that sort of stuff. So for me, a winner, I really am looking at multiple units of them
cool.
in Venoms.
Nice.
Finally, that brings me to the characters.
Yes.
Archons have gone down in points overall, really, even with the blast pistol.
That's interesting.
So I never did think that Archons were the best HQ anyway, to be honest. But given the fact that they are relatively cheap now, and given the fact that Slay the Warlord isn't as much of a thing anymore.
Not really.
You can afford to be a bit more aggressive with them, in my opinion. Sure, people can take things like Assassinate, I get that. But you can afford to actually use them in a bit more of a utilitarian way, which, you know, helping your combat units, helping shift people off of objectives. And with that 5-point cheap blast pistol as well, they've got a bit of anti-tank duty there in a pinch, or just taking off some extra wounds off of elite infantry and so forth. So for me, Archons are a winner. Jazar, still pretty good for his points, relatively speaking. 105 points, he's a bit of a beast. Succubus, okay, you know, Homunculus, you're going to need your Homunculus in if you're taking any Coven units anyway. Overall, I'd say the characters are not in a bad spot.
Cool.
Relatively. So they're a winner for me.
All right.
All right. They're not. There's nothing revolutionary about them, but they're a winner.
Yeah.
And look, that covers the good, really. You could say that Haywire, Scourge are good, but they're kind of doing the same as what they did before, and they are generally a one and done type thing. So they fill a niche depending on the list that you're building. I certainly wouldn't say they're bad, but they're not like a major winner from the Munitorum Field Manual.
Right.
So that's all of the good for Drukhari. Unfortunately, we do have to cover the bad.
Yes.
That's coming up in a moment. It's time to talk the bad. Unfortunately, there is some pretty bad stuff for the Drukhari now. And you'll really have to think very efficiently to make the army work, in my opinion. So the first thing I'm going to kick off with is a Splinter Cannon, because
They're your favourite.
Yeah, well, I like a Splinter Cannon.
Yeah.
I think the poison weaponry in general it can be pretty good, especially it can be very overwhelming.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
and people with low saves, hordes with low saves, hate it, and I get that. I really do. And so they're probably celebrating, like, yes, Drukhari, your Splinter Cannons, yes. Which is fine. But
Yeah, there was a big party.
we
all had it.
I wasn't invited.
No. But you were talked about.
Oh, I can imagine. Thing is, you do have some ways around it, which I will speak a little bit about. But basically, the biggest issue is the Splinter Cannon's 15 points, and that affects all of the platforms that we could go on. You know, from Talos, like, it's ridiculous now. There's a Talos with Splinter Cannons is more expensive than a Talos with Haywire.
Right. So
I mean, that's not just bad. That's just plain dumb.
Yeah. That makes no sense.
You know. That aside, I get why it sort of happened, because people were thinking probably Venom spam, you know, but they could have hit the Venom more rather than the Splinter Cannon itself. But as it stands now, I'm going to link in with the Venoms, which is also part of the bad. A Venom with 2 Splinter Cannons at 90 points is just bad. They're a good transport, don't get me wrong, but they are not what they were, because in 9th edition with Fly, I can be tagged, and I can't fall back and shoot how I used to. Now there's a stratagem you can use, Cruel Deception, to be able to do that still, but that would just be on the one unit. And yes, you can fire into combat with your guns, sure, you know, that's a good thing. But frankly, a Venom at 90 points with 2 Splinter Cannons, when you compare it with, say, something like a Starweaver, and Harlequins are one of the big winners from the Munitorum Field Manual, actually.
Yes.
One of the big winners, which is cool, you know, I like Harlequins, but you've got a Starweaver rocking in at, 70 points for 2 Shuriken Cannons, a 4+ invulnerable save, and holds 6 models.
Yeah.
And it's the -1 to hit. The Venom's 90 points with 2 Splinter Cannons. And I would rather have the Shuriken Cannons every day of the week. I'd always want the Shuriken Cannons.
Yeah, they're so good.
I know people go, oh, but you can have 12 shots of this. But yeah, but the Shuriken Cannons are actually much more versatile against vehicles and against others. You know, I'd rather, against infantry, I'd be like Toughness 3 infantry, I'd be winning on 2s. Sure, I've got less shots, but I'll take Shuriken Cannons every day of the week. So, you know, the Starweaver, points-wise, just doesn't make sense in comparison with the Venom. And I don't think a Venom's worth 90 points. I don't think it's worth 90 points for 2 Splinter Cannons.
No.
It's not.
Probably not. The thing is, because of all of my flashbacks, like, I kind of go, it's worth it. It's 100% worth it. But, like, the thing is, when you look at, when you make that comparison, then I kind of go, right.
The issue is because we'll get to the troops, but because your base cost of most things has gone up, you're now looking at a package Venom with its troops loadout, which generally aren't the most frightening thing in the world, the Drukhari troops, as being too expensive for what they do, for their outputs.
Yeah. And
given the fact that you need those bodies generally in 9th to hold objectives, it puts Drukhari in a really odd space in terms of holding things, which is why I think I like the things like the Incubi, why I'm liking the Talos even more.
Yeah.
Racks do have certainly a space, a spot to do that objective holding, which they did before, to be fair, but I'm going to get to them in a bit. So I think that the Venom and your Cabalite squad or your Witch squad is just too expensive. It's just too expensive. It's bad. It's actually bad as a troops choice. Having said that, your simple fix to take the edge off is you just don't pay for the 2nd Splinter Cannon. Because reversely, you get your twin Splinter rifle for nothing.
Right.
which is just plain ugly. Doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make any sense. So what is the actual difference between a Splinter?
Well, your
rifle
difference
and
is the Splinter Cannons gives you a bit of extra range,
sure.
which is good. And your Splinter Cannon will actually give you extra shots when it's in rapid fire range. It's got a rapid fire range of 18 inches.
Right.
So it goes from 3 shots to 6 shots. Okay. Whereas your twin Splinter rifle goes from 2 shots to 4 shots, but at 12-inch range.
Yeah.
Now, you've got, if you're doing something like Flayed Skull, you've got the extra range to move with your Venom anyway.
Yep.
So you're much more likely to get into 12-inch range. And with my experience with Drukhari these days in 9th, you're tending to get into range quite quickly because you're swarming an objective and your opponent tends to be trying to swarm that objective.
Yeah.
So you're fighting over it, so you're going to be within 12 inches. So the simple solution is you just don't buy the second Splinter Cannon. It's as simple as that, because then the Venom's 75 points and that's worth it.
Yeah.
You go, yeah, okay.
I'll take that.
So you end up getting 2 less shots, when you're in rapid fire range. Fine.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. Because that is, you're saving a lot of points.
You're saving 15 points of Venom. Yeah. And then your infantry, if they are Kabalite warriors, are also going to be in rapid fire range then.
Yeah, exactly. And then you've got
you've got more shots.
And you've got your change for your blast pistols. Listen.
Cool. Right, let's move on to the next thing.
Okay.
Disintegrators and Dark Lances. I'm going to bring in Dark Lances and Blasters. Dark Light in general is generally bad, in my opinion. I know that's a big statement to make.
Pretty big.
The big statement to make.
The Disintegrators.
The Disintegrators were outstanding.
Yeah.
Then they were okay. And I'll explain what I mean by that. When Drukhari first launched, the Disintegrator was a disgustingly good and efficient weapon. It was too cheap on its base platforms for what it did. Then new codexes came out, things went up in points over time, and actually the Disintegrator cannon, in my opinion, ended up being just about right. It ended up being just what it was. Now, one of the biggest culprits for making the Disintegrator cannon hated was the Black Heart combo, where you had Writ of the Living Muse. So your Archon would be giving you reroll 1s to hit, and he would then be giving them reroll 1s to wound. The Disintegrator cannon at that point on a Ravager platform, and usually 3 of them, would become really quite nastily efficient, and it would just murder things like Marines, and they would just not have, they wouldn't have very much fun.
Yeah.
But in a post-Marine Codex world, where Marines laugh at things, they were laughing at things like modifiers before 9th, where you're now capped at -1 to hit.
Yeah.
But because of the rerolls, right? But in a post-Marine world, where Marines became quite cheap, relatively speaking, with Drukhari, and could actually run a tremendous amount of troops, and generally they were Primaris troops, so they would have multiple wounds, so your poison actually wasn't as effective anymore because you weren't killing Marines. So you actually then, as a Drukhari player, were relying on the Disintegrators to actually get some troop clearance.
Yeah.
They were okay, and then they were like good with Blackheart.
Yeah.
They were still good, but they weren't broken actually.
No.
And now with the points hike on them, they're actually really expensive. And in fact, unless you're taking Writ of the Living Muse, I would argue that the Ravager is possibly not worth it anymore.
Oof, that's huge.
I know, I'm saying it's just plain, the problem is, it's a bad choice from a points efficiency point of view, but it's one of the few anti-tank choices you have.
Yeah.
So you're left going, ouch, that's not a good choice to have. That's why I'm calling it bad.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Are they still a good shooting platform? Yes. It's just the points that you're paying for it, right? In comparison with what other armies can get. So I'd still say that they're worth it if you're taking Black Hearts and Writ of the Living Muse, which a lot of Drukhari players probably still are going to do. But at 160 points for a kitted out Ravager, the Dark Lance just isn't a reliable enough anti-tank platform. I'm looking at things like the Reaper a lot more fondly.
Okay.
So that's a Forge World platform.
Yep.
It used to have a heavy weapon on the vehicle, but now with 9th, which meant that it would get a -1 if it moved. Now with 9th, actually,
Doesn't
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
which is good. And it's actually got quite a bit more flexibility because it's got like a 2d6 shot anti-infantry weapon.
Right.
And it's got basically a d6 shot Dark Lance, which is good for anti-tank.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of more looking at something like that than the traditional Ravager setup. But yeah, for me now, I think the cost you pay, the points you pay, and the fact that they're not super resilient really makes me question their worth. Like, would I rather just have something like 3 Void Raven bombers?
Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, yes.
Yeah, it's a tough one because I'm not saying the Ravager is bad and not to take it anymore ever, but I'm saying that the points are bad. Right, let's now discuss the FAQ.
Yeah, this was an interesting one that I really think hurts Drukhari. Actually,
That's a lot of armies.
Harlequins as well.
Yeah.
The new Lookout Sir change to that wording was a surprise. I don't really see that coming or think that it was necessary at all.
Yeah, I think it's a mistake. I do. I hope it's a mistake.
Yeah.
Because if that is the intention, it's certainly not how, as playtesters, we were playing it.
Nope.
And so hence why I think it's a mistake. But hey, look, I'm not the voice of GW, and GW do make mistakes. And, you know, all we can do as playtesters is feed it back.
Yeah.
So we've already fed it back that we don't think it's a great change, if that's the intention. And look, if it stays, we'll adapt and overcome. Yep. You know, that's it. You work out new ways to get around it. But a lot of it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So what is the FAQ? If you've been living under a rock, if you're watching this, you probably know the FAQ.
Yeah.
Because you're effectively looking for tactical insight into something. So basically, if I've got 3 racks standing next to my homunculus, and they're in front of him or whatever, you can't target my homunculus. All right? But if I've got a venom there, you can target the homunculus.
Yes.
Because it's under 10 wounds. If I've got a raider there, you can't. Mm-hmm. But you've got a venom, you can. Furthermore, if I've got 2 Talos in front of that homunculus, you can target the homunculus.
Yeah, because
they're under 10 wounds. But if I've got 3...
But aren't the Talos monsters?
Yep.
7...
But they're under 10 wounds.
Right.
But they can be a unit, so you can take 3 of them, and then there'll be 3 in the unit, and then they can block it.
Right.
Likewise, let's go Space Marines. If I'm a Space Marine character, you've got a Space Marine character there, and I've got 3 Dreadnoughts in front of that character, 3 of them, I can still shoot the character.
Yeah.
Because each of those individual units are under 10 wounds. Now, the reason it stings something like Drukhari or Harlequins or, you know, any MSU style army, multiple small unit style army that relies on these lighter transports is because generally those characters are by themselves and using vehicles to screen.
Yeah. And now they can't. So with especially armies like Drukhari, it means that you're having to get your troops out early, which kind of goes against a pretty strong play style that you play with them.
Because it's one of the few play styles that works for them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of muted that. So suddenly your characters are sitting ducks.
Yeah.
But, so then you kind of go, okay, well, I'll get my infantry out, which will fall over to a stiff breeze.
Yes, they die.
They just
like
die in
anything.
droves. Once they're out of the transport, you just go, cool. I'll just go, they're gone.
Yep.
Like, you've got to get them out first.
Yeah.
And that's where that resilience and speed and strength came from. So now what it seems to have done is, particularly with Drukhari, and again, I think because we've been saying for a long time that Harlequins have come out really well, this will sting them too as well, like quite badly actually, because they, I mean, that's a different story.
Yeah.
We're getting off topic.
We'll do a faction focus on
We'll
Harlequins.
do it. But I just don't understand the reason behind it.
Yeah.
why, because that's always been the sort of play style with them for all of 8th, and it's not been, although it's been frustrating to play against, that was kind of the army, that was how it functions. So if you remove that, I don't know.
Well,
I don't know the answer.
Well, the answer would be people will say, "Oh, well, you just adapt and you right." Well, I'll take hordes of witches, infantry on foot. I'll take. Obviously, you can put the Archons with a little court in their own venom, so you've got some little, you've got some little ways around it. That's like the Slith, yeah. But you would need the Slith and say 2 Lemians. Or 3, you'd need at least 3 models to block. But the thing is, it's very easy for someone to kill those.
Yeah.
The Slith, not so easy, but...
the Slith is invincible.
He's invincible, yeah. But the point is that, yeah, you need to start thinking about it. So people could argue, why don't you just put infantry on foot, take lots of racks? Because they're really expensive.
Yeah.
Because Drukhari don't play as a horde army.
No.
They can't. Their line infantry are too expensive to roll that way. So... if you don't take the transports, you die. And if you take the transports, your characters die. If you don't have enough units around them to screen.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to be really defensive with those characters. Maybe you want to look at raiders now. So you've got a larger block of infantry in with them. Or you can put you can put your incubi in, or mandrakes went up a point, so maybe you want to sort of screen out more with mandrakes and have the character. But again, they're an expensive screen. You don't want to be doing that. So you get how it can cause. And look, it's not just Drukhari. I'm sort of mentioning it now because I also think it's really silly that a Space Marine captain can't sit behind 3 dreadnoughts.
Yeah. That doesn't make any sense.
That changes the dynamic of the way the game's played quite dramatically. I'm not going to say that that's going to be bad if they decide to keep it, but it's certainly bad in terms of game design for certain codexes, which will really struggle to get around that.
Yeah.
They will really struggle to get around that.
Yeah, well, it just kind of takes the wind out of their sails with their whole I've got this fast-moving army, and I do need these characters to help buff them and to make sure it's efficient and make sure it works. And then suddenly you go, no. And everyone goes, great. Bye. I've just lost all my ability to score properly and stuff like that, and put the herd in where you need to. So, when I read that, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So
I do know it's bad.
Yeah, I genuinely think it is actually a mistake. And look, if I'm wrong and it's actually the intention, I'm wrong. Fine. But it wouldn't surprise me if GW have to do an FAQ on their FAQ, which is also bad. But these things happen.
They happen.
You can complain about it and say this is the worst thing ever, but that doesn't change the fact that it just needs to be changed. And if they change it soon, good on them. Yes, it sucks that they did it in the first place, but mistakes happen. It's what it is. Okay, so that's the bad.
Yes.
Now we're going to go on to the ugly. All right, team. It's time to talk the ugly now. Drukhari, it's generally it always has been generally a good book, one of the better books. There's a lot of hidden gems in there. There's a lot of synergies that can work. You can make witch cult work to an extent. There are some things which are just dumb. Like Hellions are still it's a gorgeous model, but you're not going to see it anytime soon. They just die to a stiff breeze, can't be delivered, aren't the best even when they get there. They've got some ways of buffing them, I know, but there's a reason why you don't see them, right? And that's because the rules don't match the points. So actually, Hellions are an ugly unit in that respect.
Yeah.
Ugly-wise, I'm going to kick off with the troops. The troops are kind of in an ugly spot because the points has gone up. I get it. We're in an age where grots are 5 points at the moment. Now, I get why that's happening overall. I get that because I get it. But it doesn't work in the Munitorum Field Manual with all of the books as they currently are. Yeah. Doesn't work, it's silly. But we're a bit expensive at the moment. The troops that we have in general are a bit expensive because they are really not that resilient at all.
No.
You know, obviously your best choice are the racks, and they're expensive now, so you're not taking tons of them. It could be interesting to go, all right, well, I mean, I always thought it could be interesting to do like 60 racks and whack them, like do 6 raiders, or, you know, and then a whole bunch of Talos. That could be an interesting army. You know, I'm just thinking of this off the top of my head, but you're paying the points for that. I'm not even sure how that will fit in. I don't think you could get 9 Talos and 6 units of racks. You might be able to. I'll have a look. But generally speaking, the witches are really easy to kill.
Yeah.
And unless you get them into combat, which you're wanting to deliver them with all of these transports, which are generally much more expensive now, it's tricksy. You know, I as my combat unit, I'm still kind of going, I'd rather have my incubi for a few points more, which has got a better save and generally is vicious in combat. Witches have a place and can be good in combat, but you know, for the points I'm paying for them and the fact that they're not very resilient when they get out and they're on the objective, really, oof. And that's just the problem with the Kabbalite warriors as well. Like once I get to the objective and my venom's been destroyed, they disappear real quick. That puts you in a bit of an ugly position. The reason I'm calling it ugly is because I feel that what the output of the units do for their points is like, it feels that they need a bit of a boost or a buff, you know, somehow. They're, you know, things like, which I'm about to speak about, Darklight, the blaster's 15 points. It's still very expensive, you know. I don't see why a blaster should be 15 points, to be honest. I know there'll probably be a lot of you that disagree with that, but, you know, what's a melter gun these days? 10 points?
Yeah, I think so.
So, why is the blaster 15? Why? Because it's got a slightly better range?
Is it worth 5 points, that range?
I would rather, the range is almost moot. I'd rather keep it 12 inches because you're generally in a Venom or a Raider anyway, which has given you the extra range.
Exactly.
You know, there's, anyway, we'll talk about that in a moment. So generally the troops are in an ugly spot for me. I've already discussed the FAQ as being bad. I also think I'm going to put it in the ugly category as well as a bonus because it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Thematically or gameplay wise, if they keep it as that. Could be that by the time this video's out, they've already FAQ'd their FAQ.
Yeah, in which case...
we still reacted to it. That's
still
what we think.
To it. Yeah.
Right, Darklight. I'm putting it in the ugly category. I think it's bad generally because I think it's overpointed, but I also I think mainly it's ugly because it's too random. Drukhari don't have good access to good anti-tank. Now you could argue that, well, every faction needs its weakness, but you should be able to create a balanced army where you've at least got an answer to something.
Yeah.
And you know, the Darklight now is so expensive for a random D6 damage weapon.
Yeah, it's the D6.
And on top of that, it's strength 8. You know, in an edition, well, I say an edition, but in even in 8th edition, you're starting to see more and more anti-tank weapons coming in with better damage outputs, you know, with something +3 damage or whatever, you know, and you're like, okay, well, this is like proper anti-tank weaponry, and Drukhari is left doing their D6 damage, which will always guaranteed roll that 1.
Every time.
I mean, obviously, look, sometimes you roll a 6, and you could say, oh, well, you know, that's what the command point is for, but you can only do that once, and...
Look, it's the same problem with all D6 weaponry.
Yeah.
It should be flat 3 damage with an additional D3.
Yeah.
Or D3 plus 2 or whatever. D3,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, I don't think a blaster should be D3 plus 3. I think that would be too powerful. But I'd rather it was 3 damage.
Yeah, I think
just make it 3, even 3 damage.
Yeah.
You've got something reliable. You go, okay. And a Dark Lance should be better.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be the same. A Dark Lance should probably be D3 plus 3.
Yeah.
Or, you know.
Something.
It's something.
Yeah. Now, I think flat 3 weaponry, you take it for days. You just think it's great.
You can calculate based on that. There's a reliability to it. You go, okay, right, well, fine. So that for me, Dark Light is generally ugly. I also think that the Splinter Cannons in general are ugly because they're kind of just like a bigger poison weapon, but there is no real difference. They just had more shots.
Yeah.
Which is just a weird, ugly rule design. Like they should be better somehow, you know, because it's a cannon.
Yeah. It's in the name.
It's in the name.
Yeah.
And that's actually it.
Yeah.
You know, obviously there's going to be things we've missed, but these videos are designed to be the highlights, the good, the bad, and the ugly, on what
and to start discussion.
my impressions are. Yeah, that's
to
it.
start discussion.
What do you guys think? What do you think? Where do you think the Drukhari sits at the moment? No doubt there'll be some chatter about the FAQ. Hopefully it's good chatter because they have, in fact, FAQ'd the FAQ. But if not, we can keep the discussion going here. As ever, hope you guys found that interesting.
I did, because I don't like Drukhari.
No.
But then, you know, we were talking about it.
We don't like anyone.
And I was feeling remorse isn't the right word, but I was like, these poor guys over there, doing their best.
Now, I'll end on a happy note, actually, because the thing is, I'm still not feeling bad about the Drukhari.
As an overall?
No, because I think the Venom at 75 points is good.
Would you call them good, bad, or ugly, do you think, at the moment?
I think Drukhari have come out in, I wouldn't say they've come out in a bad position. I think FAQ-wise, bad, sure. But I think with good positioning and so forth, I'm willing to play around that. Like, especially as a Cabalite player, like my Archons weren't generally clutch for me anyway. If you're doing Writ of the Living Muse, that guy's pretty clutch, but actually around 3 Ravagers, they are protected. Yeah, so your tactic is still sound. I still think Drukhari can be good. Yeah, actually. I think with a combination of looking at things like your Talos, things if you're wanting to go pure Cabalites, your Incubi, or anyone else actually, just adding the Incubi in is good. I do think we have things like the Reaper, which are a bit more interesting now. I do like the Haywire Scourges now. I'm sort of looking at those more reliable wounds being plinked off of vehicles now, combining it with things like Void Raven Bombers, combining it with your cheaper Dark Light blast pistols. You know, we're in an interesting spot. I don't think we're as good as we were, but I do think that weak kills can still be good. I do, for example, still think that Venom Spam can be very, very effective. I think it can actually be brutally effective in 9th. But I think it can be it's ugly because it's a bit bland, because you might end up going, oh, well, I'm just going to take nine Venoms with Cavalite Warriors, and you know, and that can be a bit boring.
Yeah, but
for your opponent.
But it makes sense.
It makes sense thematically, though. It's actually very themed. It is how the Drukhari operate. This dark flotilla. They come in thousands of boats. You know, so it's cool in that respect. Yeah. So I still think they can be good. Good. So overall, I'm looking forward to playing with some competitive lists with them soon. Got some Tacticas coming up.
Yeah, play against someone else, please.
I'll be playing you. So until next time, this has been The Spider and the Bone, and we'll see you soon.